We'll talk about third-party risk management and how you should never be discounting your risk from a third party.
So, Bindi, tell us a little bit more about this supply chain attack you've seen.
Yeah, so this is an interesting one, and supply chain cybersecurity and overall supply chain as a target has been prevalent for us for a while, but more so in the recent months. This is an attack on SITA, who is basically an IT vendor for majority of the world's airline companies, and they've known to be compromised. And the type of data that's been leaked is more around the sort of loyalty. Airline miles and all the things that we sign up for when we fly, frequent flyer miles records and so on. So again, this is personal information, passport information, things related to our flying profiles. And this goes to show, and it's supposed to be a highly sophisticated attack. We don't know the exact attack vector yet. There's been talks about how this industry is usually getting hit by supply chain attacks through SQL injection, through legacy systems that they have that are not patched, and malware outbreaks in there. The reason I wanted to just bring this story is at the end of the day, if you think about supply chain security, it's sort of this problem that's been sort of overlooked, swept under the rug for a while, right? So we seem to think that, oh, I'm trying to take care of my own security, or I'm hiding behind let's say, a data class agreement. But at the end of the day, this goes back to the cliche of you're only as secure as your weakest link. And especially what the malicious actor is after is not always payment information, right? So I've been in security for 20 years, and when we talk about security being around data and how valuable that PII is, which is basically personally identifiable information. It's not, just the payment data or just the healthcare data. This is commoditized data that they can actually profit from, right? So you can use somebody's, profile for frequent flyer miles and use them, right? So this is, ways that the malicious actor is going after to generate revenue from data that's, being used here. And we don't know exactly how many airliners have been impacted by this, but reports that are public say it's about 500,000 passengers records that have been leaked, right? So this goes to show that we can't really ignore supply chain security, and we can't really forget all about where data resides, right? So your data that you consider critical is not only sort of credit card data, not only intellectual property. Think about all this customer information across different industries that we are collecting, and how that can be leaked through a third party. And this is again, you can't just say, okay, this is my perimeter, I've secured everything inside it, now no longer my problem, right? Because given what has happened for us in terms of transformation and overall supply chain, there's so many linkages now. There are so many platforms in which we are sharing our data. And this, again, I wanted to bring this because supply chain should not be sort of a forgotten security measure, and we need to continuously monitor, right? So you cannot just think about it as a once and done engagement, that you've monitored each of these third parties through an automated questionnaire that you sent out, and you sort of verified it just based on that. This cannot be something that you just do on a one-time basis or just on an annual basis and think that you're covered. Keep in mind that irrespective of which vertical you're in, right now it is about the airline industry. We've seen this before, in terms of retail. We've seen it, in terms of healthcare supply chain being attacked. So across verticals, I think, everybody should be thinking about where are they with their third party, risk management and their overall supply chain risk profile. And, make sure that you're continuously monitoring the security posture and the risk posture of your suppliers. And don't just think, oh, I have to have legacy software, running in this because it won't work otherwise. And then, nothing is going to really happen here, right? Every type of company in my industry uses this vendor, or every type of, company in my vertical uses this platform. We can't just go with that status quo, and we really need to focus on supply chain security.
Yeah, I agree, and this isn't the first time in recent memory that a supply chain attack has occurred. I think one of the major obstacles with supply chain attacks is is what it requires to sort of defend against it. You know, when you get an update for some software, or when you're installing new software, and how do you know for sure that it's clean? How do you know for sure that it's just not going to be, have some ulterior motive, and laden with it, within it? You test it yourself, you reverse it yourself. A lot of organizations, a lot of companies, they just don't have the manpower for that. They don't have the technical know-how for it. They don't have the budget for it. It just makes it hard. I'm not trying to make excuses for not, practicing good security. But when you're talking about supply chain attacks, it's just really hard to defend against them. It's a little bit like 0 days, where everything's patched, everything's up to date. We have a great AR team. Everything is as it should be. But, there's this vulnerability that nobody knew about until now. It's tough. But you're absolutely right. You should not ignore supply chain attacks. There are things you can do to sort of reduce the risk, so to speak. And it's a good story to call it out.
I'm thinking about this, and we know very little of the technical details of the hack at this point, right? We know that the data has been out there. They've reported the breach. And it's being called a supply chain attack. Now, the description of a supply chain attack you just provided aligns with the way that I think of the SolarWinds breach, right? Someone actually modified software that got spread out to everybody else, and then those are the victims, right? You've got the primary victim who owns the software, and the true targets were the ones who that software spread to. But I think what we're actually talking about in the SITA case is that the reliance on a third party as part of your processing, right? I think that's a slightly different definition of what a supply chain attack is. And to me, the difficult part of dealing with that is that you can't exactly fund the security of all of your third-party vendors, but they're just as critical, right? I mean, if you choose to trust somebody with your sensitive data, you've got to have some standards as to how it's going to be treated. You've got to have some feeling that they're not going to introduce a bug, they're not going to mishandle the data, and that sort of thing. But you also really can't just, unless you're going to budget to plus up their security and anybody else you choose to do business with. So the ultimate solution is for everyone across that entire software ecosystem or service ecosystem to have a very well-funded, well-maintained, and well-run cybersecurity program. And I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. Am I off on that one? But it's a different definition. But I feel like that's the key challenge in this space.
Yes, I think it's between sort of a play between sort of overall supply chain security and then vendor risk management, right? So if you think about it, right? So, let's take in this case, of course, we don't know the exact details in terms of anatomy of the attack, but what you can do, right, as a parent organization, like everybody has to do their part in security, right? So if you are an IT, services provider to a set of industries, you need to make sure you're securing all of your software as well as all of your, assets that you have in place in terms of infrastructure. But then if you are a company that is using a platform like this, then you can vet, right? You can do a lot of, sort of vetting measures as part of that vendor risk management program. You don't have to fund their security, but you can say, for me to do business with you, you need to meet a certain standard, otherwise you're not doing business with me. So in the healthcare space, what was happening was they were starting to require a high trust, certification to be able to do business, as a payer, right? So, you can do a lot of measures where you're trying to vet a basic minimum standards of security. I think in today's day and age, to maintain a healthy infrastructure and make sure you have your assets with whatever patches are known and whatever vulnerabilities are known, you definitely, owe it, to yourself and to people who do business with you to be able to patch that, right? So we can take care of we can only lower the risk profile, right? We cannot really change it and say, okay, there's nothing called zero risk, like we all know, right? So we can't really say this will never happen to you, right? It will, right? But have you been able to limit the impact, and then have you reduced your risk exposure? Again, that's where we can go. So whether it is sort of third-party risk management, vendor, security that you want to call it, or in the larger scheme of things, supply chain, this is not something that you can think it's somebody else's responsibility. While you don't have to fund it, you still have to have some sort of an onus in this bigger picture so that we all get to the point of sort of this link being stronger.
We're probably years off from this, if ever. But I read a story months ago about a POC that was done with a financial organization where they were using homomorphic encryption to send encrypted data, and there was computations being run on that encrypted data in an encrypted state, and then the result was returned to them. So the third party that received that financial data, which included, users' financial information, it remained encrypted in transit and while it was being computed on, and it was returned encrypted. So that's pretty amazing. There are, of course, a lot of other considerations. Homomorphic encryption is just a huge topic and a huge field. But in this case, that would be sort of applicable. If ever. We'll see.